Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Regina Leung from Vancouver Asian Film Festival. I am the VAFF Industry Program Director, and thank you for joining us today with the VAFF Virtual Lunch and Learn with Canada Media Fund. So before I start, I would like to acknowledge the land that we are broadcasting at is the unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. And today we are very exciting that we have two of the CMF business analysts to join us, and then they would share all the information about all the programs that they offer and also different type of details. So I would like to bring them out to the in front of the camera right now. Hello, everyone. So we have Sasha Dryden here and also Christine Chiu. And you guys like to do a quick introduction of yourself, and then we can dive into our presentation. And then after that, we have an open Q&A with our audience.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice to meet you, everybody. I just really brief introduction. I've been with Telefilm for over 2 decades and have worked in both the feature film side and the television side. And I'm always excited to meet emerging producers and to, share information about the programs.
Thank you, Sasha. Christine?
Yeah, I'm Christine. I've been with Telefilm now for a few years on the CMF PA team. I've worked in development and now I'm in production.
Great, thank you so much. And would you guys like to start off with the PowerPoint right now, the deck? Okay, so we'll go to the screen here.
So I guess I'm going to get going first. This is, you've met us, we've introduced ourselves. So my colleague and I thought this was a good place to just give a little description of the distinction between the organizations. So Christine and I work for Telefilm Canada, but we refer to, and you'll see throughout the presentation that we're referring to CMF, the Canada Media Fund. And that's because we work for the department within Telefilm that administers the Canada Media Fund funding. So we're essentially a program administrator, and that's what our title is, and you'll see that in our titles on that slide. So, and the distinction further is that the CMFPA, CMF Canada Media Fund Program Administrator side that we work on is administering funds for programs and productions that are in the linear category that are ultimately going to be going to be aired on broadcasters or platforms held by CRTC licensed broadcasters. Or we have a strand in the CMFPA side that we administer that's for games and for elements for productions that aren't attached to a broadcaster. So today we're focusing on a particular fund that is underneath that broadcast strand. The distinction between what we do and what Telefilm does on their side of programming is that they work on feature films that are destined to go to theatrical release or are going to have some sort of release in an exhibitory kind of release. Sometimes one project will access both portions of funds, but we don't cross over back and forth between feature film and CMF funding. We work specifically in the one side. So the funds that the Canada Media Fund has to spend and that we administer on their behalf come from a number of places. First and foremost, Canadian Heritage, and then Canadian broadcasters pay into the fund, and it's the portion of those funds that we also administer as part of what we administer with the Canada Media Fund. I think on the next slide, you'll see this is the amount of money that we had available to spend on productions through the Canada Media Fund this year. So, and it gets broken down into English and French, and then it gets broken down into the different funds, specific funds. So you can see there's, we had $357 million to spend this year. Some of it through the envelope system, which is where a broadcaster says, yes, please spend this much of my envelope for this year, and some of it through a selective system where applicants are applying in competition with others. But every year we publish, at the beginning of our fiscal year, we publish this kind of breakdown of how much money there is to spend and how that's going to be divided within the different pots of money that we administer on behalf of the Canada Media Fund. Just having a look at our slides. Yeah, this is a good one. One of the questions that we often get is, who are the broadcasters that we can work with? This is sort of a broad strokes list of broadcasters who have envelopes for this fiscal year, 24-25. Our fiscal year ends March 31st, 2025, and a new fiscal begins April 1st, 2025. So this list is from this current year that we're in the process of kind of closing up and finishing up. And so those are like the names of the broadcaster entities that have money that they can allocate towards projects to be contracted within this year. So that changes from year to year. Arriving at those numbers is a result of a kind of formula, a calculation based on a number of things, how much they spent, etc. I couldn't begin to tell you how the formula is arrived at, but every year it's the responsibility of somebody at the Canada Media Fund to arrive at these numbers. And so the reason why this is an important slide potentially for individuals here who are looking to partner with a broadcaster is that this is the list of the current broadcasters who have been spending money with the CMF this year, who have been funding projects with the CMF this year, and that we've been administering. So when you're looking to find out who's potentially a good broadcaster for your project, this is the list of ones who are active with us. You could go to their website, see the kind of programming that they do, to help determine whether or not they might be a good fit as a partner, a broadcast partner for the project that you're working on, and then start, trying to work to establish a relationship.
Yeah, so so that's the broadcaster envelopes and the list of broadcasters that you could use for reference, as Sasha mentioned. So the CMF funds linear content programs, and what that means, it's the creation of television shows, um, and also you have to be an eligible applicant. What that means, you have to be a Canadian controlled for-profit company. As for the projects, they again have to be content for television, and there should be high levels of Canadian elements. That includes specifications for key creative and license fees from Canadian broadcasters, which must also be the primary funding trigger. For the genres that the CMF funds is only 4, which are drama, variety and performing arts, documentary, and children's and youth. And there is further specifications in the guidelines about the specifications of these genres. So guidelines, you can find them on our website. One thing to note about the development programs, and I'll go into detail about the pre-development and also the pre-development and development streams under the Program for Racialized Communities. And Sasha will talk about the Program for Racialized Communities production. For development, all of these different programs here are under one combined guideline. So they're in one section of the website. For the PRC program for production, it has its own specific set of guidelines. So I just want to make that distinction here. And I wanted to talk about the pre-development program, and this is just information that you can also see from the guidelines. It is a first come, first served program, and this is about the general pre-development program. The opening date was June 4th of this year, and it closed pretty much on the same date. So even though this program has an opening date and a closing date, generally in many of the past years, all the funds have been depleted on the first day. So meaning all the projects that were eligible and fit the guidelines, they receive funding, but maybe on a prorated basis. So that's what a first come, first serve program means. For the funding requests that you can make, it's a maximum of 84% of a project's eligible costs, or up to $35,000. Some notes about the budget for this program is that at least 40% of the budget is reserved for regional projects. And that just means, very briefly, projects from applicants and projects that are based outside of Toronto. At least 25% of the pre-development program's budget is also reserved for diverse community projects, which is further defined in the guidelines. Who can trigger funding for this program? It'll be Canadian broadcasters and participating funding agencies with a letter of interest. So you don't actually need a financial contribution from the eligible trigger for this program. You just need a letter of interest, and each funder is limited to supporting 2 projects. Eligible applicants can apply with 1 project per fiscal, and eligible costs are per the budget template, and you can ask for costs for script, researcher, etc. For pre-development, we don't expect you to have a scripted application, but that might be something that you want funding for. For program for racialized communities, there are streams targeted for pre-development and development as well. For this year, this program is no longer referred to as pilot. And racialized communities for this program are Black people and people of color, and they're further defined by the CMF in Appendix A to the guidelines. For PRC pre-development and development streams, they are on a first-come, first-served basis, similar to the general pre-development program that I went over. The opening date was September 17th, and similar to the pre-development program, all the funds were depleted on the first day. For pre-development funding stream under this, under PRC, it's also 84% of a project's eligible costs, or $35,000. The development stream is the lesser of 75% of a project's eligible costs, or $100,000. So for this program, an eligible applicant must be controlled by a racialized owner, which is defined in the guidelines, and they must exercise full creative financial control over the company and project and meaningfully develop it. One thing to note is that they must have at least 51% ownership in the company and a majority of the copyright. You can only apply for a maximum of 1 project for each of these programs, even if you're eligible. And for the pre-development stream specifically, applicants who receive funding in the previous fiscal year is ineligible in the current fiscal year. So we're in the fiscal year of 2024-25. Applicants who receive funding for pre-development under PRC would have been in 2023-24, that would have been eligible for this fiscal. And who can trigger funding? Only Canadian broadcasters. But each broadcaster is capped at a maximum of 2 projects for pre-development and 5 projects in development. For pre-development, again, only a letter of interest is required. For development, a broadcaster must provide a fee of at least 10% of the eligible costs. And I'm going to pass along to Sasha to talk about production.
Thank you. So similar to all of the criteria that Christine talked about, there's actually slightly different for the production program. We have what's called a deadline for it. It's not first come, first serve. It's actually a deadline date when the projects all have to be submitted on that date. And then there's a process by which the projects are evaluated. Some of the aspects of the projects are evaluated by us, the analysts who are working on the fund, but then there's also an external jury of peers who are analyzing and scoring other aspects of it. But it is a deadline date. There isn't sort of an opening and a close. The system opens a few days before so that people can start an application, but then there's like a drop date, and that's when the application has to be in the system. Otherwise, you've missed the deadline. It is broadcaster driven again, but there is the opportunity to have a Canadian distributor also provide some funds towards what we call the eligible commitment threshold, and that's basically market support from a Canadian broadcaster, and starting this year, some of that support also given by a distributor. The threshold requirement is 10%. And by that means 10% of your project's budget has to be contributed has to be from a license provided from the Canadian broadcaster. And again, this year, some of that 10% can also be provided by a Canadian distributor who is giving a specific type of funding. The CMF contribution in production is the lesser of 60% of the eligible costs, or 750,000 for drama and animation, or 550,000 for documentary, variety, and performing arts and children, also capped at the lesser of 60%, or 550. So just really quick distinction, when the guidelines here talk about eligible costs, and they refer to eligible costs in development as well, eligible costs are, you can treat them as like budget. The reason that we refer to them as eligible costs here is that if down the road, throughout the process of evaluating, or even at the end when the project is submitting to sort of show what was spent, if we identify any costs that aren't eligible, and we do have guidelines that talk about those kinds of things, about the business policies. But if there are any costs that we identify as ineligible, we won't relate to them. So the guidelines talk about eligible costs, but in your head, you can also consider that as budget. It's basically eligible costs, AKA budget, unless there's any costs that we identify as like costs we won't relate to, in which case we would relate to only the eligible costs. So that's the cap amounts, 60%, lesser of 60%, or 750 for drama, and then for the other genres, lesser of 60% or 550. Again, as with development, there is an ownership and control element that has to be adhered to, and is an eligibility criteria, ensuring that the racialized owner of the company has at least 51% ownership of the company, and majority ownership of the copyright. And it's a criteria that's hard and fast. So the fund is targeted towards racialized producers, racialized creators, and so the parameters for who's able to apply and the ownership structure of the company is very strict. And then additionally, part of the elements that are being scored and that are also being considered with a project are the key participants, the key creative, specifically producer, screenwriter, and director. There are other elements that we look at. We look at gender parity. That's a bit of a scored element, meaning points are awarded to a project for being able to have specific roles held by self-declaring individuals who are self-declaring as women. And then the diversity score is to give points for individuals in key roles who are self-declaring as a member of a diverse community. In that section, it's important to note that the diverse scoring doesn't actually include the racialized individual. It's for other self-declarations of diversity. So disabled individuals, or Indigenous individuals, or 2SL LGBTQ plus individuals who are self-declaring. They may also be racialized, but we're only going to be relating to their other diverse declarations. So because the fund is closed for the year, there's no more intake this year. So we are looking at we're looking at this year's guidelines for the fund that's closed. It's likely that this will be very similar again next year, but we thought it might be helpful to sort of show you what the grid looks like. So this grid is in the guidelines, the production guidelines, and it breaks down what categories, what pieces of information that are provided in an application that we're going to look at in order to arrive at a value to determine a score for each category that the project that will receive, because the projects they're competing against one another for a limited pot of funds. So the projects with higher scores will be the ones that get funded. So these categories, they break down into market interest. Actually, I can't see it super well. Yeah, market interest, team, community and sustainability, and creative elements. So the business analysts on the CMFPA team, we'll evaluate the market interest, and that's all the things that you can imagine are related to market interest. That's broadcaster attachment, other pieces of financing that are involved. The team, that's track record of the production team and the creative team. The external jury who is working with us on this fund, they'll be the ones who will look at the individuals who are put forward and who are attached to the project, and they'll make an assessment and score those categories. Internally, the CMFPA team will look at parity and diversity as part of that team calculation. And we'll also look at community and sustainability. For the most part, there's a form that you would sort of complete some information on. For the most part, we just simply want to see that you've had some thought, put some thought into how you're actually going to sustainably make the production and how you're going to reach the community and build community as part of what you're doing. So it's not too onerous a form, but we want to understand that you've put some thought towards it. And then the very large portion of the 100 points that are being awarded to a project in the production program, in this production program, is awarded for creative elements. And these are, I would say, the more subjective points, but they're also the largest proportion of points. So with 55 points being awarded. And this score is awarded by the jury. So there are 3 jury members who read and score each project. It's like 6 or 7 jury members who are attached to the fund, and 3 of them are always assigned to, each project is reviewed by 3. So the external jury are the individuals who will be reading the script, looking at the demo that you provide, looking at all of the creative elements that you've provided to arrive at the score for originality and creativity, and also innovation in form and production. So yeah, it's a lot of information that you have to provide, but the information that we're requesting for the program is as a result of the need to have all of these elements reviewed as part of deciding which projects, deciding on the score for each project and deciding which projects will get funds. In advance of an application intake, we always recommend that people talk to us as much as you need to, reach out to us as much as you need to get clarification on what you need. And we also recommend that it's a good idea to have someone who's not necessarily attached to the project, whose feedback you respect. Have a look at your application package, because there may be things that you understand about a project, but somebody reading it from outside the project may say, well, this information isn't totally clear, or I think there's more information I'd like to hear. You can just sort of get an arm's length perspective. And then the other thing would be to provide as much as you're able to in order to show as much information as you can in these categories, so that the jury looking at the things that they're looking at, they don't have to try and fill in any gaps. You're giving them as much creative material as you're able to, and you're giving CVs and background information for the team, and then also the business elements can be looked at with the, you've provided as much as you're able to for the business elements that we look at. It's lengthy and it's in depth, and there's kind of a lot that's requested. So again, we always recommend pick up the phone, talk to us, get some feedback, get some insight. We're happy to provide that for you, because these applications take quite a bit of work, and there's quite a lot that you have to consider. And we've done this more than a few times. So we're happy to be a resource for you when you are actually, undertaking putting a package together, or even considering coming in for the program. We can help you maybe understand the program a bit better, so you can decide if it's a good fit. So I think we kind of want to leave a little bit of space for questions.
Yeah. So we'll come back to the screen at this moment. And then there's a few questions that's on the comment stage. Let's start with, okay, so, all right, let's see this one. This is from Ronald. He say, how many people are on the CMFPA team? Is this one team for all program or each program has their own specialist?
Sorry, how many people are on the CMFPA team? Is it one team for all program? There's, oh my goodness, I think maybe there's around 60 to 70 people on the CMFPA team, and that's not 60 or 70 analysts. We have designated people who work on IT and accounting and the other support parts of the team that are specific to us. And then to be honest, I don't know how many analysts or how many managers we have combined, but our team is across the 4 offices or the 4 regions. So Vancouver, Halifax, Toronto, Montreal. And then of course there's English and French. So in the Montreal office, we may have analysts who work on both English and French files. In the English teams, we generally have it's English speaking analysts and managers, but there is some crossover. So yeah, I'd say 60 to 70 people are on the actual specific team. And in terms of specialists, there's analysts who work primarily in certain funds. That's their comfort level, that's their experience that they bring to it. There's analysts who work on a number of different funds. There are analysts who work on the side of the CMFPA funds that administers to the digital side, so the video games, there's sort of the innovation side. Those are the funds that don't require a broadcaster. And there are analysts who that's specifically what they work on. And then there's the analysts and the managers who work on the linear side, and that's the one that has a broadcaster and or a distributor attached. So there are some specialties within it. And then further specialties, somebody like me, I've been working on the Indigenous Fund for a number of years, which is great. And, I've worked on specific funds for a number of years. Christine has worked on specific funds. She's got things that she's worked on. Each analyst may have things that they like to work on or they like to participate in. And then in general, there's sort of general funds, the envelope funds that we all tend to work on together.
Great. Any add-on, Christine, from your side?
That's perfect, Sasha.
Okay. So that's another one. The question is, what is the LICS pre-development deadline for 2025?
Yeah, a good point about that is that all the deadlines don't get announced till April. So what we communicated were the deadlines that were communicated in April 2024. So next year, April 2025, you'll find out the deadline for pre-development then. But just a note, this year it was in June, so maybe next year it'll be the same.
Okay, another question. Will there be development funds that can be triggered by a distributor?
I don't know.
Yeah, probably not. I'd say don't count on it. We've just opened the doors for one fund this year for the first time that doesn't require a broadcaster trigger, that can be fully triggered by a distributor. There's one fund. And one of the reasons is part of the requirements that we have, the I forget what it's called, but part of the relationship that we have with Heritage is that a big chunk of what we're administering, it has to be broadcaster driven. And so almost all of the linear side, the broadcaster driven funds that we administer have to have a broadcaster. Even the ones that can have a distributor attached to contribute to the trigger, they still have to have a Canadian broadcaster, except for this one fund that is now the only fund, and it's a production fund. So at this moment, I wouldn't call it a pilot fund, but I would say it's the first year that it's been offered, but it's production only. have to kind of see what happens and whether or not that extends into development or just stays specific to production. So for right now, no, has to be a broadcaster attached.
Great. Okay, next one. This is a longer one. For the broadcasted envelope program, CMF is automatic, but PLC, pre-development, development and production funding, CMF external jury decide which project are they fund. Is that correct?
I can answer for production financing. The external jury is part of the decision making. I don't think that there's an external jury for pre-development or development. I think
exactly. It's just internal analysis. Yeah.
And it's part of like first come, first serve for pre-development and development. Whoever gets in the door on the day and is also eligible, it's like first come, first serve. So part of that is wanting to make sure that your project is eligible on the day that you arrive, so all the paperwork is there. You're very quickly able to be confirmed as eligible, or your project is very quickly, and the applicant is very quickly able to be confirmed as eligible. And then if there's more money being requested than there's available in the pre-development and development pool of money, then everybody who was eligible on that first day when the funds run out, or whatever day it was that the funds ran out, you'll be given a prorated amount of that money. But in production, yes, there's an external jury that's evaluating sections of the information, and then there's the internal analysis, the analysts who work on that. So there are two different approaches to how the funds are decided.
That's actually triggered me to ask this question, because it's first comes, first serve as the pre-development part. So how do you guys analyze and pick it? Because when you first come, first serve, is there any specific criteria of what you're looking for besides they fulfill all the requirement based on the application? Is there any?
We don't timestamp it, if that's what you're asking. We're not timestamping it. It's always on the day. So like for
and there's it's basically any projects that are eligible. So per the guidelines. So if we receive more projects than funding is available, we just give a proration. So if you asked for 100,000 maximum for development, and more people apply, you might even be prorated 50%. We don't know. It depends on how many people apply and are eligible. So there's no extra analysis or time stamping, as Sasha says, to kind of cut down on the programs. It's whoever is eligible on that first day that has applied. If we receive more applications than we have funding for, which has been the case.
Definitely. But is there any no criteria besides what the application require? Like the story, the background? No, nothing. So
not
they
for
just
pre-development or development. No.
Yeah, but just keep in mind that we only do fund like 4 specific genres, and dramas, and specifically, it has to be set in Canada, it has to feature Canadian characters. So if you come in with an American project, not eligible, right?
Yeah, and kind of further to that, the documentary genre, it's a very large section in the Appendix A where we give all kinds of examples of what's an ineligible documentary, or what's not counted as like factual. So that one is also worth spending some time with, because documentary, as I'm sure everybody is aware, has become a very different kind of genre in the last 10 to 15 years. So what we define as documentary is very much around factual programming, as and things that wouldn't fall under documentary by our definitions are things that are lifestyle or reality based. And so it's important that our eligibility evaluation is also going to be looking at the genre content to make sure that it's not offside for genre. So
great. No, thank you so much. I asked this question. Probably the audience will ask a similar things too, right? And then just curious the overall application, because this is all Canada, right? Like, what is the percentage that you end up funding? Just for curiosity.
I I think that's hard to answer. I think it's year by year, like in production, I know that if we get a lot of projects, like we don't know how many we're going to get from any given year, from one year to the next. So it's hard to answer. I mean, if every single project asked for the maximum that they were able to for their genre, I think maybe we could get anywhere from 15 to 18 projects funded, maybe not even that much. But not everybody asks for the full amount. It's hard to answer because we just don't know how many and what we're going to get from one year to the next.
Mm-hmm. Just for curiosity,
Yeah.
because everyone
You can. There's a CMF has the funding database, so you can look once it's been announced. You can look for the previous fiscal year how many have been funded and what they were.
Right.
Great. Thank you. So now go back to the questions because a lot of questions coming in. So while we were chatting, so that's perfect. Let's start with this one. Okay. Is this mainly for MOW and episodics? Most distributors in Canada are feature first with only from few doing television, but the guidelines need like they are adopted from broadcast.
Yeah, so I think Ronald, you may be talking about the distributor program. So the program for racialized communities or program for racialized Canadians is very much a broadcaster driven fund. You can have a distributor attached to help meet that threshold. But it is under the umbrella of the broadcaster driven funds. So there has to always be a CRTC licensed Canadian distributor providing some license, some portion of the threshold being met by that Canadian CRTC licensed broadcaster. And then a Canadian distributor can kind of supplement that to reach that 10% threshold requirement. So, but in terms of the distributor pilot, that's kind of another conversation. And I see that you've also posted that you do have questions about the distributor pilot. So I think that's maybe what you're referring to. And I'm happy to give you plug in my email. I think it's actually on the slideshow. It might actually be on the slideshow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now
can we?
Now I guess
it's asking me to sign in, so I'm not even going to try and sign in to give you my chat. Yeah. So you're welcome to send an email and ask some questions that are specific to the distribution program, and I can connect you to somebody who can maybe answer some of those specific questions for you.
Yeah, I see that you have a lot of specific questions about the distributor program, and unfortunately, we won't be able to answer them. So, yeah, you'll have to direct them to either one of us, and we'll pass them along. So sorry about that.
Yeah, they're probably questions that our coordination team is already answering, or that the deputy directors who are managing that fund have already answered those questions, or they have those questions, they have that information that available at their fingertips. So what we would do is we would want to connect you to those individuals so that you can get the most current information that's being shared by potential applicants at this moment.
Okay, so let me take a look. This one, this is probably not the distribution, right?
This one from Sue.
Yeah, I think you have to jump to Sue's question.
I'm going to jump to Sue's question. Okay, you start that PRC is broadcaster driven. Has PRC ever funded a feature-length film that was exhibited by the broadcaster or released via electrical?
Yeah. So we do. Yeah, we do have. We do have broadcasters who do also work in the theatrical space, or we also do have projects that are intended to be exhibited in the theatrical space. And then part of that is that they'll have a Canadian distributor on board to release to the Canadian market. And they end up having like a relationship. The distributor may have like a first right for theatrical, and the broadcaster will have exclusive rights for a broadcaster, they'll sort of have some terms about their arrangement that are detailed in their arrangement. But yeah, the PRC Production Fund and Development and Pre-Development accept drama, which does include projects that are working towards theatrical distribution. It bears noting when you get to the production financing stage and making a production application, there is a limit put on how many theatrical films will be able to access PRC funding. So when we get all of them on the deadline day, we'll see, we'll list all of the projects that have been received, and we'll be able to identify how many dramas are theatrical feature films. And so we'll know that if all of them were to receive a positive decision for funding, that we would potentially have to reduce the amount awarded to all of them, or have to limit how many would actually be able to access the funding, because there is like a maximum number published in the guidelines for how many theatrical feature films are going to be able to get access. Part of it is because the telefilm side of the organization, the feature film side of telefilm, that's their bread and butter. That's what they're doing. They're supporting theatrical feature films. The two sides can work together to co-fund a project, but the idea is that we don't want to get too far into the theatrical funding that telefilm does on the Canada Feature Film Fund side of the organization.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think this one is something unique. It's we call CAFCO 1010. However, if we allow 1 point alone Canadian star, doesn't that make it a CAFCO 910 allow? Would that?
It might have to do with his distributor pilot program. These questions, number 5 and 6. So
yeah, I think you're right. I think Ronald is asking some very specific distributor questions. Again, I would advise you definitely email us both, email one of us with your questions, and we'll make sure that your questions get to the right people who are handling the distributor fund program.
Yeah.
Great. So let's see the next question. This is from Jason Carmen. Can the project include language other than English and French?
In a word, no. If you're coming in, like, it has to be one or the other. We do have another program called the Diverse Language Program, and that's for projects that are going to be produced in and aired in another language other than English, French, or Indigenous. So, but in terms of this program, it would need to be either English or French.
I think the next question is similar in a sense. Are there any specific guidelines we should know about in regards to profanity or others language outside of English?
Yeah, I think Sasha mentioned, there's
Yeah.
not much flexibility.
Yeah, there's no, go ahead, Christine.
Oh, no, just for these programs. But as you mentioned, there's a diverse languages program, which is specifically for other languages outside of English and French.
In terms of content, including profanity, we're not judging on that. What we are abiding by, heritage, and I'm spacing on the actual branch of heritage that talks about content, profanity, etc. We're abiding by those. So in terms of content, in terms of egregious content, profanity, pornographic material, those sorts of things, we are abiding by what Canadian Heritage is established as acceptable or not acceptable in those elements. We're all adults. So when we look at a file and there's some spicy language and some adult-oriented content, people having relationships, etc., that's life. So we're not clutching our pearls, I guess is the expression, about that sort of thing. We are looking at it to make sure that it fits within the genre criteria, And if there is content that is very clearly outside of the bounds of what's acceptable for, of that nature, then we're going to have an internal conversation around it. But, if you've got characters who are talking a little smack and living lives that are, more interesting than most, that's unlikely to raise any red flags. It just needs to be within the boundaries of what heritage actually speaks about in terms of the nature of the content.
Okay, so let's see. This is the last question. Clarifying if dramas mean narrative versus the genre of drama and does not include other genres.
It's narrative, so it could be comedy, it could be horror, it could be a thriller.
Yeah.
And you can read more about it in scripted basically, and you can read more about it in Appendix A.
Yeah. And I just want to acknowledge Sue's comment, Sue Beck. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name well. Making a comment about the available options for funding diverse voices. Yeah, I agree. It's really exciting that the CMF made these options and increased these options over the last few years. We're seeing a much more diverse group of voices and producers coming through the industry and coming with broadcaster attachments, and it's really great to see. And more of it, personally, it's, I feel like more of it, the more the better.
Great. So it's pretty close to the time, but I just want to share with everyone. I believe that we can share the deck to the audience that they are here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay.
Yeah, it's a PDF.
So anyone, so if anyone, email us at industry@vaff.org and we'll be able to share the deck, and which is that Sasha and Christine's contact information is in the deck, so you can feel free to contact them for any questions regarding to the CMF funding in all those different programs. And then the other thing is, it sounds like if I were you, we kind of know it's around April or May or June, and it's first come first serve for like if you're a pre-development. So I would say go read all the details, everything on their website, because all the information is there, and we read through. That takes time to read through all those information. As when I read through it, it takes me many time to digest it. So
yeah.
I will highly recommend everyone start doing it now, because now I know it's the first day and it's gone just like that, right?
Yeah.
So so I would say prepare the documents and also register to the system as well.
Yeah, that's right.
The last day.
You can sign up on the CMF website to receive the industry blasts, newsletters, that sort of thing, and that's really helpful because in March, end of March, beginning of April, when information about the new fiscal year that's just about to open or has just opened, when that starts coming out, that's where the guidelines will come through. The industry blasts will go out to everybody who's signed up, and it'll be like you'll see links to the guidelines. You'll see information about the deadlines for all of the funds. All that kind of stuff will start coming out in a rush, and then throughout the year there'll be more information shared. But that's where you'll sort of know new information has come out about a specific fund or about the funds in general, and so you can keep up to date. It is good when you're thinking about your timeline and about approaching broadcasters and distributors. It is good to remember that our fiscal year opens April the 1st. The funds don't necessarily start being active as soon as we open the door, but they start becoming active not too long after. So, but part of that consideration is that if you are in fact intending to come in the door with some of those very early first come first serve programs, you're probably going to make sure that you're having a conversation with your market partners, your broadcaster, in advance of that. And it's kind of also imperative to look at the festivals and markets that start rolling out throughout the year. If you've got the ability to get to some of those markets or to get on to the online outreach, for broadcasters and for the market, it's good to try and get yourself signed up so that when the doors do open, you've already started establishing those relationships, or maybe you even have a commitment from one of those market partners already and you're getting ready to go, or you're establishing relationships throughout the year. So it is kind of like understanding where the deadlines are, understanding when we open our doors, but also understanding that you can start putting the pieces of the relationship puzzle with market partners and with your project in together before we even start opening our door. And it's probably a good idea to try and start doing that before we open the door, because these things can take time, and building relationships can take time, and projects or funds that are very competitive, you kind of want to be as close to ready to go as you can when they open, which means you have to be putting those partnerships together before.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So for everyone on the audience here, thank you so much for joining us and listening and watching. And then tomorrow, we still have our full day screening and the industry events at the Scotia's Bank Theatre at 900 Barras Street. If you are in Vancouver or close by, come down to our screening. We have 5 programs, and then our industry events. If you're a producer or creators, come join. We learn about law, all the entertainment law, distributions, financing, tax credit, and all this exciting sort of like a business affair information. And it's something will help you to get opportunity to get funding as well. And then last but not least, we still have our closing screening, and the director and the cast is coming to join us as well. So hopefully everyone, you'll be able to come down tomorrow with your pass, and also our ticket is still available online. Check out VAFF.org. So, and thank you so much, Christine. Thank you so much, Sasha. And you, everyone, have a good afternoon or good evening or good morning, depends on where you're at. So we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Great questions.
Bye.
Thank you, Regina.
Thank you. Bye.